Welcome to our Weber County Commission meeting. It's 5:30 on this Tuesday, November 26th. We welcome you, those of you who are here in person, and those of you online, and those of you who may be joining us at another time. We appreciate that. The agenda for this meeting consists of the following. We'll have a Pledge of Allegiance by our own Shelley Hallisey. The invocation will be given by Commissioner Sharon Bolos, and I'll take the thought of the day. We'll go to that point now.
Please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we come before Thee at this time, grateful for the opportunities that we are given each day. We're grateful for this country in which we live and the freedoms that we enjoy, and for the opportunity that we have to assemble as we do. We're thankful for those who have gone before us to secure those freedoms. We're grateful for those who fight to protect those freedoms each day. We pray for them and their families. We're grateful for those who serve in our county, for our employees, and for their families who support them. We ask You to watch over them and to bless them with the needs that they have. We pray for Thy guidance this evening in the decisions that we make, and pray that the Spirit will be with us and that we may do what's in the best interest of those we represent. We pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner. You know, I decided to do a little research on Thanksgiving. I like Thanksgiving, being a man of girth. It's a good day for me. I thought I'd talk about the original feast. You know, although it's widely accepted that the very first Thanksgiving happened in Massachusetts in 1621, some people believe otherwise. You know those people. Yeah. Not only do they think the first ever feast occurred earlier in 1598, but it also took place in San Elizario, Texas, near El Paso, according to the story, to celebrate surviving their travel through the Chihuahuan Desert. A Spaniard, Juan de Ornate, and 500 members of his crew threw a huge feast of fish when they made it to Texas safely. Well, if you've ever been to Texas, you know that that'd be something. Here's another thing that I found interesting. Cutlery. You know, most people say, well, put a fork in it. That's what they probably are saying to me right now. We're done, but no. Whenever the first Thanksgiving took place, it did so without forks. How about that? The utensil wasn't commonly used until about the time of the American Revolution in North America. Although it's supposed both knives and spoons found a place at the pilgrims' tables, still, can you imagine trying to eat the turkey with a spoon and a fork and a knife? Just a little something for you. Cranberry sauce, another one. The sweet potatoes, they wouldn't have had that because that wasn't invented back then. Neither was pumpkin pie. They didn't have pumpkin pie the first Thanksgiving, although they did a wonderful job with apples back then. Just another little known fact. Here's another thing, too. You know, on your way to that dinner, you probably sang a song called One Horse Open Sleigh. The song was originally written as a Thanksgiving song, and later they changed the name to Jingle Bells to usher in that first Thanksgiving. All kinds of wonderful little things. Here's another thing, too. The date. Thanksgiving hasn't always taken place the fourth Thursday in November. In 1939, FDR moved the holiday up 1 week to help boost retail sales during the Depression. So many people complained that it was eventually moved back to the original date in 1941. The Thanksgiving between those years are referred to as Franksgiving. Just saying. And here we go, Swanson. Many of us know Swanson. We've eaten some of those dinners out of the box. But the first ever TV dinner came from Thanksgiving leftovers in 1953. And that's how the Swanson folks started, with that little thing. So, I thought those were some great little things to just talk about that holiday. But whatever the case is, and whatever you decided, whether it's poultry or beef or pork or tofu, we hope that you enjoy mostly time with your families, and you commemorate just being able to break bread and to sit around a table and enjoy one another's company. To have thanks and gratitude is a wonderful thing, and according to many of the great writers, having gratitude is some of the great things what one can have as a quality. So that's my thoughts, Commissioners. There you go. All right, we'll move now to our public comments. These are items related to this agenda. Now, at 6 o'clock, we'll have a budget hearing, but this is just a time for us as commission to pay the bills, more or less. And so, just real quick, are there any in the public that would like to comment? Any online, Shelley? With that, we'll move on to our consent items. Item 1 is a request for approval of warrants 103,671 through and including 103,793 and 487,857 through and including 488,006, and number 40 in the amount of $3,364,699.65. Item 2 is a request for approval of the purchase orders and $79,806.89. And item 3 is a summary of warrants and purchase orders. Mr. Ricky Hatch, if you'd go ahead with that and give us the highlights of those expenses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We issued 10 purchase orders this week for $80,000. We had 2 items at 20% or 25% of that amount, or $20,000. One for property management to purchase communication parts and service, and then one for the health department to purchase vaccines. 19% of that amount, or $15,000, is for the transfer station to purchase fuel and heavy equipment service and repairs. 18%, or $14,000, is for the fleet, and that's upfit for sheriff vehicles. As far as checks, we issued 274 warrants for $3.4 million. A third of that amount, or $1.1 million, went to the conference center remodel. 16%, or $522,000, was for escrow releases for Taylor Landing and Sunshine Valley. 14%, or $462,000, was for the jail, which was mostly medical services and counseling, as well as some culinary. 2 items at 8%, or $280,000. One was the Weber Housing Authority, which included housing payments and some building improvement costs, as well as 8% for the paramedic services. Our top 5 vendors this week were Hogan and Associates Construction for $1.1 million, Heritage Land Developments for $517,000, Vital Core Health Strategies for $370,000, Ogden City for $140,000, and Weber Fire District for $92,000. And since we have a couple of minutes, and you were on the Thanksgiving theme, I'd like to share. I was on a video call with my 10-year-old granddaughter on Sunday night, and I wanted to impress upon her something exciting in our family that related to Thanksgiving. I said, you know, Amy, 404 years ago, your 10th great-grandfather sailed across the ocean on the Mayflower. His name was William Bradford. Did you know that? And her eyes got really big, and she said, does that mean I'm British? That concludes my report.
Boy, she's smart. Wow. That's great. Okay, perfect. Commissioners' questions for Mr. Hatch?
None.
Hearing none, I'll just go to 4, which is a request for approval of a retirement agreement by and between Weber County and Matthew Mayer. Item 5, and by the way, Commissioners, that paperwork's in your packets. Item 5 is a request for approval to sell surplus property identified as 19, 2, and 41. Questions?
No.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for those consent items.
Move to approve consent items F1 through 5.
Second.
Motion and a second. I'll place that for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item G on our agenda is a public hearing. Now, this portion will begin at 6 p.m. So with this, Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion to saunter until that or around 6 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we will saunter.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Welcome back. We entertain a motion to cease to saunter.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion and a second, all in favor? Sorry, thank you, Quinn. Motion, we've got a cease to saunter, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the public meeting and convene a public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
I'll place that for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Welcome. Thank you. A special welcome. We've got former Commissioner Charles Jamerson Ebert that's in the audience, and also Mayor Vanderwood from West Haven. We're welcome the two of you here, sir. Well, great. Item number 2 is the public to take input on the Weber County 2025 tentative operating and capital budgets. Link has been provided in the packet. Again, you can, anyone who's interested can go to webercountyutah.gov, and that link is there. But we're going to ask Mr. Scott Park to come forward and make that presentation at this time.
Thank you, Commissioners. I just want to point out that on the agenda right now, there are actually 2 public hearings, and this is because of Senate Bill 91, which passed in the last legislative session, which says that we need to separately notice any action that would increase the compensation of executive county officers, which would include elected officials, also department head, division directors, and so on. And so as the 2025 tentative budget includes an increase for all county employees, including these, we're noticing them separately. I'm not going to talk about them separately. I'll present that information with my regular presentation, but just wanted you to be aware of why we have those 2 separate items on the agenda, and then I guess I would defer to you to determine whether you take comments for one item and then the other, or whether you do it both together.
I think I'd like to thank you that we'll take, as listed on the agenda, just go ahead and make the presentation on both, and then we'll
Okay.
take the comments on both.
All right, awesome. So Commissioners, Weber County is responsible for a budget of $317 million of expenditures in the 2025 calendar year. And that includes the Health Department, our internal service funds, enterprise funds, capital projects, and governmental funds. I frequently get asked questions as to why, if the county has so much money, that it can't take money from one department and use it to fund another department. So, for example, I frequently get asked the question, why can't we take some money from Parks and Rec and use that to fund public safety? Or why can't we take some money from the roads and do this? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I just talk about how county governments are funded. So the county receives funding from several different sources: taxes, sales tax and property taxes. We also receive grants from state agencies, federal agencies, and so on. And we also have charges for services and fees, and that would be a charge or a fee that we put on somebody when they want to use one of the services. So, for example, we operate a transfer station. When people want to dump their garbage, we charge them for that. Most of these revenue sources, most of these funds have legal restrictions on how the money can be spent. And so, Commissioners, while I say you have a budget of $317 million, you actually don't get to decide where a lot of that money goes. It's determined by statute, and we're just custodians of that, transferring money from one pocket to another pocket, from one agency to another agency. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So starting off, let's look at property taxes. So this is just a sample notice I grabbed from the 2024 tax bills. This is a home that has, it's not a primary residence, it's a secondary home. So that's why the taxes on this $400,000 house, the taxes and the market value are the same, and they're paying about
Because they don't receive the discount for being homeowner occupied.
Correct. And this would be like a secondary home. This would be somebody's renting it out as an Airbnb, or they own a couple of homes and this is their second home. So I just wanted to point out that, so they're paying $5,000 of taxes, and of that $5,000, most of it goes to entities outside of Weber County. So Weber County Corporation is getting 17 cents on the dollar. The rest of that money, 83 cents, is going to the school district, it's going to the city, it's going to special service districts. So while they're writing a check to Weber County Corporation for $5,000, Weber County Corporation isn't keeping this money. We're just getting it, the treasurer's office is processing it and sending it right out the door to the different cities, to the school district, and so on. So that 17 cents on the dollar then gets further divided, and I wanted to show that. So On the specific example, that of that $5,000, $863 is actually what is going to Weber County Corporation. And of that, you can see how it's being split amongst various funds within Weber County. So there's some money that we pledged to pay back some bonds for the library. That's $42. There's the library operation costs. That's $174. There's the health department. They're getting $30. Paramedic, assessing and collecting, flood control, and so on. So each one of these buckets collects money, and the money in those buckets can be only used for those purposes defined by statute. So commissioners, you can't tell everybody you're going to raise money for flood control and then take that money and use it for Parks and Rec. If we told them we're going to use it for flood control, we have to use it for flood control. So if we levy a tax for a specific purpose, it has to go to that purpose. So here's just a couple of examples of the funds within the county. We have 21 financial reporting funds. We have a few more than that are sub-funds. But you look, you got the general fund, you've got culture, parks and rec, the library, transportation, and so on. Each one of these funds has its own separate revenue source. We track the revenues and expenses for each one of these funds separately. So I actually have multiple sets of books that I keep that are all interrelated, but I balance each one of these funds as though they were their own business. So Weber County is not just one corporation, it's a conglomeration of a bunch of different funds. And we report on each one of those funds and have an audit on each one of those funds separately. So let's just talk about the general fund. So that's about $100 million. So we went from $300 million, $318 million that you control to $100 million, which is the general fund, which is the fund you have the most influence over. I say influence over because there's still a lot of services that are required by statute, like providing for the county attorney's office, providing for public defenders. So while you can choose how that money is allocated for that function, you have to do that function. You can't just decide, oh, we're not going to fund the county attorney's office this year, right? That's a statutory obligation. We have to fund it. So the general fund is the one that most people are familiar with, and if you just look at how that goes, 55 cents on every dollar goes towards public safety. You've got another 6 cents on the dollar that's going to fund the attorney's office, those are the prosecutors. 5 cents on the dollar that's going to public defenders, that's to fund the defense for those that don't, the indigent defendants. And then you've got some money that goes to health and welfare, some money that's going to general government, and then 5%, which is just a lump all catch-all for the other. So those tax dollars in the general fund can be spread out amongst those services. We have a separate, well, sorry, let me go back to the general fund. I wanted to show how those expenditures break out actually by function. So if you were to look at what we actually spend the money on, 70%, over 70% is actually on employee compensation. And that's because the county is a service organization and it's the people that provide services. So travel and training is less than 1%, transfers to other funds about 3%, equipment about 1.6%, and then everything else lumped together is about 23%. But when you look at that, the county is payroll heavy. We have a lot of employees and they provide services, required services by statute. So that's why you see that expenditure number there. I wanted to talk a little bit now about parks and recreation, culture, parks and recreation. Where does that money come from? Culture, parks and recs are funded by our tourism taxes. So if you ever stay at a hotel and they say, hey, it's $99 a night, and you look at your bill and you're like, well, wait a minute, it's $99, but then I've got all these extra taxes on there. What are those? Those are transient room taxes. Those transient room taxes are added to the hotel charges for anybody who stays in Weber County. That tax is then sent to this Culture, Parks and Rec Fund and is used to fund Parks and Rec. If you go to a restaurant in Ogden City and you buy some food, the prepared food, there's an extra 1% sales tax added to that. That money also comes into this fund. So when people say, well, can't you just cut what you're spending on Culture, Parks and Rec? I say, no, I can't. They have their own separate tax rate, their own separate funding source that is used, that the people have chosen to put on those to fund those services. So Culture, Parks and Rec is not getting property tax for its operations. It's not getting property tax, sales tax from the general fund. It's got its own separate tax rates that are dedicated just to Culture, Parks and Rec. Now, I just want to clarify that the county does help with some capital contributions to Culture, Parks and Rec, but the operations are all covered by the fees they charge or the taxes they collect.
The operations are covered by that TRT.
Yes. TRT and
And not-
TRCC.
Yeah, TRT, TRCC, and not by the property tax.
Correct.
And by state statute, they can't be transferred to another department or division, or they have to be spent within something like that.
Yeah, you have to spend it, and the slide went away. You have to spend it on one of those areas. So it's got to be parks, recreation, cultures. There's an itemized list in the statute of what we can spend the money on, and we have to report on it every year. And so, no, public safety is not allowed. I can't take the money and put it into public safety. I can't take it and put it in the clerk auditor's office budget. It's got to stick.
Or
in
pay
that
the
budget.
attorneys or any of the.
Or the attorneys or anybody else. It's not in the general fund, so I can't use it to fund general fund expenditures.
Great.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, I just wanted to highlight a few. So our transportation revenue, we collect a lot of money in sales tax that's dedicated specifically for transportation. Most of that money gets passed through to the state to help fund UTA, but some of it, 35 cents on the dollar, stays in Weber County, and Weber County, through the WACOG process, allocates that money out to all the cities and the county. So this isn't money that's just being used for Weber County Corporation. This is funding roads in North Ogden and Ogden City and all the different cities. This is the WACOG transportation dollars. So that money's coming in there, and it can only be used for transportation. This is how we construct new roads. Can't be used for any other service. It's not a general fund, so I can't use it for my general fund services. I feel like I'm kind of beating a dead horse on this, but I just wanted to talk one last one, our municipal services fund. So most of the residents in the county live within inside the boundaries of a city. There are some in our upper valley and lower valley that currently are not in an incorporated city. You three commissioners serve as mayors of that unincorporated area, as though that they were their own city. And so we actually have a fund that is paid for by taxes collected on those unincorporated city residents that's used to fund city services. So we don't use general fund dollars to pay for building inspection or planning or engineering in those unincorporated areas. They have to pay for their own services with their own taxes and their own fees. So it's a completely separate fund as well, and only those who live in the unincorporated areas are paying those taxes for those services. So we do have the Upper Valley right now that's voted to incorporate. When they incorporate, all those residents will see the general fund line on their taxes stay on their taxes because we don't use that money to fund their services. They'll see a shift in that unincorporated line, which is at the bottom of their notice. That'll go away, and the new city will pop up in its stead.
That'd be 2026.
2026, correct, yeah. So what we do every year, because we never want to be surprised, I take all the expenditures and all the revenues in the county and I project that out for 5 years. We look at what our minimum and our ideal operating fund balance would be, and that's between 2 and 4 months worth of operating expenditures. And then we just compare to see our trajectory. Are we doing okay? Are we running out of money? Are we living within our means is really what this question is trying to answer. And as I look at the general fund, I say, you know, we're above our recommended line. We're not above the statutory limit, but we're doing pretty well in our general fund. We're healthy. We're watching what we spend. We're making sure to balance our ongoing revenues and expenditures, and we're saving for a rainy day. So in our general fund, we are doing well. The one thing I will point out here is we are currently engaged in a compensation study where we are having a third party review all of our positions to make sure that we're paying in line with the market. If that study comes back and says, you know what, you need to increase your wages or salaries, we'll look at that and we'll make some adjustments, but we have plenty of fund balance to do that, and we can phase that in over time as we can afford it. But that's the only big thing I see on the horizon in the next 5 years, you know, barring any COVID-19 or some, you know, unexpected event like that, we should be fine in our general fund. Let's go to the library fund next. Library fund we're watching for now. The library fund is capital intensive and payroll intensive. They have big facilities and they have people that are used to maintain those facilities. Right now their fund balance is healthy. We're transferring over some money that we've saved in a restricted account, and we're giving it to the library so they can have it to do capital repairs and improvements. And we're watching this fund balance. I don't see any reason that we need to make any adjustments to the tax levy at this time. It does look like it's going down, but we tend to be conservative and we project higher our expenses, and we're very conservative in our revenues. So we watch that every year, and that's why we go out 5 years. And in the 5-year horizon, I don't see any need to make any adjustments. Again, pending that compensation study.
Let me, if I may interrupt, since you're here, Linda, I want to compliment you because I know our Weber County Library System spends about $47, $48 a year per person. At our local libraries, we have fantastic libraries here. They're in good shape, good condition. Most of them are newer. Our circulations are 4 and 5 times what our neighboring counties have. And you compare that, commissioners, against, for instance, the Salt Lake Library System, and it's about $112 per person. So we're less than half, and their buildings are older or they're antiquated. They do a wonderful job. So since you left libraries, I thought I'd bring that back up and compliment you, Linda. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Our next one is our health fund. Our health fund primarily receives grant funds it out. They do have a property tax and they do charge some fees. One thing about the health department is if we lose a grant, we cut those expenditures that were related to the grant. So the health department fund is healthy. I don't see any need to worry about the health department fund in the next 5 years, again, pending compensation study, because they kind of right the ship. As they lose a grant, well, then they adjust those expenditures so we're not paying for that service anymore. The one fund I did want to talk a little bit about in more detail is the paramedic fund. So just a little background on this. Every couple of years, we have a third-party consultant review the calls for services, the population growth, and how long it takes to respond to those calls. We have a benchmark of about 8 minutes. We want to be able to respond to a call within 8 minutes. Now, there's some areas on the county where it's just too far away. You know, if you're at the top of Powder Mountain and you heard it's a little longer. But we want it to be, you know, most of the population within that 8-minute range. Well, we're to the point now with the county's growth and the demands for services that there's some areas up in the Northview Fire District that are above that 8 minutes. And so working with that consultant, they've recommended reallocating some resources and actually adding another paramedic unit up to serve that northeast part of the lower valley. What that will do is it will require an additional paramedic contract. Right now we have 6. That means we would be going to 7. And so if we do that without making any adjustments on the revenue side, where fund's not going to be sustainable. We're going to start spending down our fund balance. And so we're putting that on here. It's something that we need to do, so I've projected that we're going to do that. Also, the remaining 6 paramedic units have come back and asked for an increase in their contract amount. They've had a lot of wage increases with their paramedic and firefighters, and they're asking for us to help pick up a portion of that. So I put those both in there as projected. Now, these aren't approved expenditures in the budget, all that. I'm just projecting out what I think needs to happen if we fund them at the levels they're requesting, and that'll be something that commissioners, you guys will decide in your budget hearings over the next year. But if we were to do that, and if we were to fund everything that's being asked for, that would result in a needed tax increase of between $5 and $15 per person per year. Again, that's not something we're proposing in 2025. I think we've got plenty of money in our fund balance for 2025, but I want you to be aware so that in a year or 2 or 3 years when we come back and we need to make an adjustment to that rate, that you weren't surprised by it, that you're aware that that's something that we're going to need to look at. Jumping on to employee compensation. So the tentative budget includes a cost of living increase of 1.5% for all employees. It also includes a pay for performance bonus that employees are eligible for based off of their actual evaluations. So if you are a stellar employee, you're doing very good, you're going to get a higher increase. And if you're not doing well at all, you may not get an increase at all. So we've done that pay for performance model over the last few years. I think it's worked well to incentivize those good employees, to pay them a little bit more, compensate them for their extra efforts. And those that aren't doing as well, they don't get as much. Yeah, we're also covering health insurance increases of 9.5% and dental insurance increases of 5%. The employees continue to pay their respective shares of 9 or 10% for our high deductible plans or 20% for the traditional plans. There are some new positions included in the 2025 budget. Several of those are grant funded. So for example, 3 social workers, a legal secretary, and our public defenders group, those are grant funded. 3 grant funded positions at the health department. We do need to fund out of our general fund 3 new officers in the sheriff's office. 2 of those are school resource officers because we have 2 new schools, and one of them is a school security chief that's required by statute. We've got another position in our attorney's office, a part-time victim witness assistant. We've got 2 maintenance workers in our Culture Parks and Rec division. They'll have to adjust their rates to help cover the cost of that, so they're going to have to bump up the fees that they charge to help pay for those positions. 1 new library position, 2 full-time animal shelter workers, and a full-time 1.5 scale attendants at our transfer station. So we put in a new scale, so it's an additional scale, helps improve the efficiency greatly, but we need people to actually staff those new scales, and so that budget includes 1.5 FTEs for that. Also included, we have some repairs and maintenance to some facilities and some upgrades. Currently, building improvements, $10.5 million. That's to finish the CJC building, and also to finish the OECC repairs, the renovation to the Ogden Nichols Conference Center. Culture and Park and Recs is receiving another $1.5 million for various repairs to the various aging facilities. those funds are coming from the tourism fund, so that's not general fund dollars, that 1.25 million. So again, that's money that's restricted for that purpose. ARPA funding, federal infrastructure, we have about 16 million. We thought we would spend it this year. It's just taking longer to get that money out the door, construction delays, supply delays. And so that 16 million we're going to roll over from this year's budget to next year. And then we are still planning to save $3.7 million in our capital projects fund for future repairs. We've got a couple of big capital projects in the horizon in the next 5 or 10 years, and we're trying to save money for that so we don't have to raise taxes to do those. Commissioner, you mentioned the tentative budget is out on the website, which it is. There are a few tweaks that we're making to that tentative budget. One was we added that school security officer, like I mentioned before. We funded some additional overtime for our CSI. We're using some Prop 1 money, some transportation dollars to help fix an intersection. We're partnering with UDOT on that, and that's our cost share. Those scale attendants, as we talked about, a minor adjustment to the OECC for some phone charges, and then our original tentative budget included a COLA and a pay for performance increase for our elected officials, but we pulled that out. The elected officials would receive just the COLA, no pay for performance increase. Excuse me, I should have clicked on that other slide. Okay. So talking about executive compensation. So as I was just mentioning, elected officials will receive a 1.5% COLA. Increases for all other county officers will be the same as for all other employees. So they'll get the 1.5% COLA. They'll get an evaluation. If they're doing well, they'll get up to a 2% pay for performance. If they're not doing well, they won't get that. So it'll be based on their evaluations just like every other county employee. The only exception to that is the health department, and the health department director's compensation is set by the Board of Health. And so they've made a recommendation on that. As I recall last night, I haven't seen the official document, but it was a 3.75% increase plus the 1.5% COLA. So that's those. Once we finalize those numbers, I will include those in the final budget, so they'll be published as a supplemental schedule. So anybody who's interested can look at those. Next steps, we will receive public comment today and over the next week on the budget. December 17th at 10 a.m. we will pass or adopt the final budget, including any employee compensation increases. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Commissioners, question for Mr. Park pertaining to the presentation on that.
I've got a few.
Go ahead, please.
I'll start at the end. Public comment is open tonight, and you said for a week. Does public comment close prior to December 17th? Or can we accept and consider any comments we might get via, say, email?
I I just need a day or two to compile the final budget for that, by the 17th. But I think one year during a tax increase, we were having comments that commissioners were considering all the way up until the morning of the passage of the final budget. So there's nothing that says that it has to end at a certain time.
Okay.
I just put a week in there as that's traditionally what we've done.
But
Okay.
this isn't a tax increase for this year.
No, there's no tax increase this year.
Okay. I also
Under
would.
the, sorry, Commissioner, under the statute, you have the authority to either adopt the budget if it's noticed properly tonight, or you can make any changes all the way up until you adopt it, just as long as it's done before the end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, also I would like you to expound just a little bit more on the health insurance increase and dental increase for dental insurance for our employees. I know that started as higher than 9.5%, so will you just briefly go over that for the public?
Yeah, it started, I think, closer to 16 or 15%. I confirm with Emily, who's back there, around 15 or 16%. Is that right? So Emily did a great job with our insurance provider. We actually went out to bid. We have had some expensive healthcare claims, so I'll just add that right now. And so our insurance providers are in the red with us right now. They've been paying more money out on claims than we have been paying them. And so they wanted a bigger increase. And so Emily and HR worked very well with our broker to negotiate that. We actually put it out to bid to see if we could get some lower costs, and our existing provider, after we went out to bid, came back and they sharpened their pencils, and they really don't want to lose us right now, and so they were able to lower that rate from 16% down to just under 10%, which is still a big increase, but it's not near as big as it could have been.
Thank you. Also, you talked about the CJCC building. There have been several funds that we've drawn from different places, grants and the Friends Board and the county ARPA funds. And I just wanted to mention, and one of the mayors is here tonight, that I believe we had all the cities on board with contributions toward this building. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I just wanted to mention my appreciation for that, because they recognize that their residents use the CJCC when those children are in dire circumstances, and it was much appreciated by the commission for them to participate. You mentioned the executive officers, and that's part of the new statute that we have to discuss that and take comments on that. We decided as a commission to exclude elected officials from the pay for performance, but we left that with the executive officers in the county. They're fully eligible for that, and I'll just speak for myself, but that's important to me, that we take care of those who take care of our people, and those are the higher levels of officers in our county, and we appreciate the work that they do. They take care of the frontline workers, and so that's important to me that we left that in. One more question, Scott. If you wouldn't mind going back to, if you still have your slides, the new FTE slides, or slide?
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind just going through those bullet points and explaining which fund those come from,
Sure.
each line.
So the social workers and the legal secretary and the public defenders group, that will be in the general fund, although I will say that there's also revenue to help cover those costs for those because they're grant funded. The 3 positions in the health department will be funded through grants in the health department, so hopefully no draw on fund balance or tax dollars for those. The 3 officers in the sheriff's office will come from the county's general fund. That will be funded by tax dollars. That's based off a statute. We need to have school resource officers, and then there was a statute change last year that required a school security chief, and so that's one of those mandates that the state says, okay, here's the law, you have to do it. They don't give us any funding for that, and so, commissioners, that's when I say, when you have a $100 million budget, you don't have control over $100 million. You have to provide the service. It's mandated by statute. Now, you can decide how you do it, how best to do it, but you still have to do it. So that's going to be general funded out of tax dollars.
Before you move on from that one, there is some reimbursement from the school district, correct, on the SROs?
Yes, there are some, yes, and we do the best we can to try to recoup costs and to share costs. So, for example, we're working with that school security chief to see if we can share that cost with other cities and or counties. We don't have the answers to that yet, but that's our hope, that we can reduce the amount of taxpayer dollars that have to go towards that by sharing that cost amongst different governments.
Thank you.
The attorney is general fund funded. As is the part-time victim witness assistant, although the attorney was able to cobble together some funding, as I understand, staff from various positions to help fund that. So that's not all new dollars, but it is a new position. The maintenance workers at Culture Parks and Rec, those will be funded with the fees, the tourism fees and or the charges for services that they levy. Library will come from the library tax rate. 2 full-time animal shelter workers. The animal shelter is an enterprise fund, so we partner with most all the cities to use our animal shelter, and we divide that cost up amongst all the cities based off of some formulas. So that will increase the amount of money that we have to put in that pot that gets divided up. So everybody, including the unincorporated area and the cities, will pay for that. And then the transfer station, those 1.5 full-time equivalents, they'll be paid for out of fees levied for dumping your garbage or accepting waste. So those will be covered by the cost of those who are using the service.
Thank you. I appreciate that additional information. That's all I have.
Great. Commissioner Farrar, questions?
Questions and comments, if I might. First off, I want to thank Mr. Park and Ms. Hebert for the great work they've done on this budget. Great presentation. We know we spent a great deal of time before we actually approved this tentative budget. Invited the public to those sessions on those number of sessions we had. I can't remember how many there were, but the public had an opportunity from way back in September to start weighing into this process. I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. I appreciate, first off, you bringing up what we do is we actually collect taxes for a lot of other entities, the $317 million. We get a number of inquiries that what's the county doing with all that money that we make the check to Weber County. Well, I think it's very clear that if you look through your property tax notice, a majority of that money by far, and you pointed it out, is dictated by state statute where it goes. We're collecting for school districts, which is the major user of our tax dollars, along with a number of other entities. And again, I think it's important for the members of the public to understand that. Some will, some won't. The COLA of 1.5%, I want to point out that Social Security this year actually did a 2.5%, if I'm recalling their numbers. Is that correct, Scott?
It was in the twos. I don't remember exactly. Emily, do you remember?
I know exactly because I'm
yeah.
at the age where I did get a notice. So I know
yes.
exactly what it is. It was 2.5%. A number of other agencies in this state and in this county actually went above the 2%, and I think that we were, as we looked at our budget, very conservative, and I think that's why we look very deeply into the pay for performance for those people that are actually performing for the county, rather than giving what a number of other agencies, districts do, which is merit increases. We want to make sure that those people that receive those monies are benefiting the county and doing their job for the taxpayer. So again, that's just one other thing. I wanted to bring up the ARPA funding. I forget how many millions of dollars that we went through a 2-year process.
50 million.
50 million that went into our communities that did things like water, sewer, across this county. Not just in one area, but across this county, that basically put in infrastructure that took that off the backs of taxpayers in those cities and the communities that would be required to maintain water lines, sewer lines, et cetera. So we had a lot of discussions on ARPA funding. We think that that was a program that was administered very well, again, by Mr. John Bond and yourself. And we look for that opportunity, as this is basically last year, that they have to come to the county and show the use of those funds, or we have the ability to reallocate those. The last thing I wanted to bring up, we talk about the attorney's office. We have one of the hardest working attorneys, prosecutors in this state. If you look at their caseloads, they're way above average for our surrounding counties. Again, they asked for more, and they could actually use more than one person, but we held the line on that, and Chris Allred has agreed that he will use that one person. But if you have any doubt, just look at the caseloads that are handled here in Weber County versus Davis County and some of these others. We need to make sure, again, by state statute, it's not something we can just say, prosecutors go away. The state requires us to provide that service. So, again, we've had great collaboration with our employees, with our departments as we put this budget together. That's my comments.
Thank you. They're both the comments very well articulated. And just to piggyback on that too, you know, and the attorneys, I don't want to necessarily, we have from our frontline first responders, whether they be from the sheriffs, whether it be from 911, or but also the paramedics,